Tomorrow we get economic news on jobs. We're going to talk to the president of Job Creators Network Foundation and chief communications officer of Job Creators Network. Her name is Elaine Parker. Ms. Parker, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Hi, Larry. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. So are you expecting good news tomorrow?
Well, the economists are expecting around 225,000 new jobs, so that would be an extremely strong number, and would certainly continue with the drumbeat of the tax cuts are working and America's growing and people are getting back to work.
Elaine Parker, I know it's not sexy to talk about stuff like this, but the partial repeal of Dodd-Frank was a big, big deal, was it not?
It was a really big deal because the fact is that Dodd-Frank caused hundreds of community banks to disappear, and that is the lifeblood where small business gets their loans. They provide 50% of all small business loans and 2/3 of farm loans. So repealing that was a huge deal for small business. There's 30 million small businesses out there, and they employ 60 million people. So there's a lot of people out there dependent on being able to get capital and get it when they need it.
Elaine Parker is my guest, president of the Job Creators Network Foundation. Elaine, President Trump promised to cut 2 regulations for every new regulation. It's been closer to 4 regulations cut for every new one, hasn't it been?
You know, Larry, I've actually heard that the promise was 2 regulations for every new one, and I've heard numbers as high as 22 for every new regulation. So that is the most untold story, is cutting of the red tape and how much that unleashes the power of small business. And we're hearing from our members that they have extreme optimism, and they're finally starting to create more jobs and invest and grow. And that's due in part to the tax cuts. That's due in part to the deregulation. And now we've got Dodd-Frank being repealed. It's like a trifecta of great news for small business and our economy.
Let's talk about health care. I know that the Obamacare mandate has been repealed. So where do we stand right now? Isn't health care still pretty high? The cost pretty high?
Right. The cost of health care has continued to skyrocket, particularly for small businesses who have very limited choices, and they don't have the high buying power that large corporations do. And that's what we're looking at next week. The Department of Labor is actually going to unveil a new rule for association health plans and what we call AHPs. And that's really going to allow small businesses to form large groups, similar to the way corporations do, and so they can share the risk and costs across the larger pool. And it will also allow them to buy across state lines the same way large corporations do. And the 2 things that's going to do for them is it's going to create more choice, and it's going to lower prices for them. And that's going to be really important for small businesses and their employees.
Elaine Parker is my guest, president of the Job Creators Network Foundation. She's also chief communications officer of the Job Creators Network. The polls are showing that about 2/3 of Americans believe that the economy is on the right track, and the majority of them seem to credit President Trump.
Well, I mean, the numbers are, you can't ignore the numbers. Unemployment is below 4%. It's the lowest level in decades. People have more money in their paycheck. Millions of people have received bonuses and increases, and small businesses are investing in their businesses, and they're buying capital, and they're continuing to grow and hire. And actually, the interesting thing is we now have more jobs than skilled labor. We actually have a skills gap that we need to address, that the tax cuts have unveiled. It's a good problem to have, but nonetheless a problem that needs to be addressed.
Elaine Parker, we only have 1 minute left. Talk to me about inflation. I've always believed that our inflation number is understated, and I'm worried that the Fed is going to raise interest rates because the economy is so strong.
Well, the reality is that the Fed could respond to our jobs report by raising the rates, and you know, they could determine that the strong jobs growth combined with the shortage of workers could cause wages and prices to rise, and that could lead to inflation, and it's certainly something that we need to address. You know, the strong jobs growth should confirm, though, that the tax cuts and the deregulation are boosting the economy. So it's definitely a concern.
Elaine, thank you very much. Elaine Parker, president of the Job Creators Network Foundation. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Larry. Bye-bye.
You got it. When we come back, Judge Napolitano is defending